Okay, so always start by just filling in whatever blanks you can. If nothing else, it might help you figure out what the problem is you're trying to solve, and I might be able to give you some part marks even if you get lost in the question. So, our example on the worksheet here, on the info sheet leading you through all this, is if you invest $1,000 at 3% compounded semi-annually, how much would you have after 3 years? So you can go through them in whatever order. I'm going to go through in the order they are given to us in the question. So if you invest $1,000, that's your PV, your starting amount. So like I say, I'm investing it, so I'm going to call it negative 1,000, but it won't be too critical if you just put 1,000, it's fine. PMT, still 0, so we'll just leave that as always 0. At 3%, so that's our nominal rate, so we're just going to put 3 there, not hit the percent key or anything, but we're going to put a 3 in for IY, and I'll run through plugging these in to the calculator with you in a second. Compounded semi-annually, so over here we've got compounded semi-annually, so that means that's going to be equal to 2 times per year, 2 compounding periods per year in a standard year. How much would you have after 3 years? So remember, N is the number of compounding periods in total for the investment, which is going to be, well, how many times does it compound in a year times how many years? So it's going to be equal to 2, I'm going to write it out, compounding periods per year times 3 years, yep. So that's equal to 6 compounding periods. Okay. So we'll enter all these in. FV is what we're looking to solve for. So that one, when we get there, we will hit compute and we will then hit the FV button and see what we get. Alright, so I give an example of the keys, of the button presses, like all the button presses at the bottom. The order is not, so how to potentially run through it, but what thing you enter first or in what order is not important. So if you want, you can always go through the buttons just left to right to make sure you're not missing anything. Or you can, or like I say, sometimes some of these numbers might not change, but you do want to make sure you've updated everything that needs to be. But let's take a look. So, sure, let's go through left to right. N is 6. So 6, and then I hit the button N. So now it should say on your screen, N equals 6. IY is 3, so it was 3% interest rate, so 3, and then hit IY. IY equals 3. PV, negative 1,000. So, remember, type 1,000, then hit the plus minus button to make it negative, and then hit PV. If you want to do positive, that's fine. But I will say we are investing the $1,000, so I'm calling that a cash flow out, which means negative for our convention we're going to do. Okay, I'm going to hit 0 and put it in payment just to make sure it's 0. It shouldn't change, so as long as you don't by mistake hit something onto the hit that button or compute that button or type a number in there, then it should be fine. And then future value we need to compute, but first we need to put in the compounding frequency. So for that, we're going to hit the secondary button and IY button, and it brings up PY and CY. You can hit the up and down arrows to see the two. Remember, if you just type in PY, it will automatically set CY, but not vice versa. But for our purposes, just enter something into PY. We're going to enter in the number 2, and then hit the enter key at the top left area. And now if you hit the up and down arrow, you should see both say 2. and then you can hit second and the compute button, which it says quit over top of, to exit out of there. So you'll hit 2. So that's the unique one. 2, you have to push 2 and then enter. So you have to hit the second button and IY to get in there. Then you have to hit 2, enter, and then again the second button and the compute button, because over top of the compute button it says quit, so you can exit back out to exit. So yes, and PY automatically it sets CY automatically. Okay, so final step, like I say, we're going to hit now that we're exit out of there, we're going to hit compute and FV, the future value, and I get positive $1,093.44. $1,093.44. And like I say, as you get quicker at this, you should get pretty fast at doing this once you're used to it, which is why I want to get you used to it, because it will help you for the whole rest of the course. And just providing these numbers to me is a really handy way for me to just say, yep, you're on the right track. I see what you're doing. You've shown me the work. In a short enough question like this, you don't have to show me any other work. You don't have to show me a formula or anything. Just fill in the boxes. Just tell me, okay, what values are you using? Like I say here, well, most of it you read from the question directly. Invested $1,000. You made it negative, although it's not critical too much at this point. 3% interest, compounded twice a year. N you had to compute still. So you're always going to have to still calculate N. It's, like I say, it's 2 compounding periods per year times 3 years. Actually, I'll mention one other thing. There is a shortcut to that. I don't normally worry about teaching it, but if PY is already set, if you've already set your PY to the correct number, like 2, there is a secondary function over top of N where it's a multiply by PY button. So I could just type the number of years, 3, and I could hit second function N, and it will and because I already put a 2 in for PY and CY, it will just say, oh, times 2 equals 6, and then I can store it in N. So that I don't usually worry about that too much, but like I say, there's kind of an auto multiply by your PY, assuming you've already set the PY. So maybe if you set that one first, then do everything else. But I think actually figuring out the number of compounding periods is useful, and I'll always be just doing it manually with you guys to make sure we get the correct number to start. Right, one other quick point I forgot to mention in the last video. Remember our memory buttons, store and recall? Recall also works on these keys. So if you are trying to remember, shoot, what number did I put in for PV? Did I do it right? Especially in some of these multi-step problems, you can hit recall PV, recall payment, recall IY. So especially if you calculate an end number for future value and you're like, that doesn't sound right, is that correct? You can at least double check your numbers that you have in there. You can say, oh, let me just check, recall N, recall IY, yes, they are the correct numbers I said. So, that sort of thing. So the recall button, recall, and then you can hit, like I say, any of those buttons, recall to check values if needed. You don't have to do it otherwise. I mean, the calculator is pretty reliable, but especially if you think there's an error in your answer for some reason, like positive interest rate, I should expect FV to be a bigger amount of money than PV, for example. And if I came out with $900, I'd be like, wait a minute, did I what did I do there? Did I type in the wrong number somewhere? So you can check the values you put in for the calculation. Yes, but you still had to hit compute to actually find the FV. And I think, probably like the rest of the calculator, yes, it also put a little star over top of the number to show you that this number is the one that was actually calculated based on all these values put in. That way, if I do put something else in for one of the other numbers, and then I go and recall FV, it'll say, well, wait a minute, I mean, this is what you'd computed before, but we don't know if that's still accurate. So the star tells you, yes, based on everything you've input, this number has been calculated. Okay. Let's apply this to a whole bunch of examples, and like I say, we'll learn a bunch of applications today for this kind of math. We're going to be doing a lot of PV and FV, and I believe in next week we'll then, the handy thing is once you get used to this, then solving for n or iy is no more difficult for the most part. You're just computing those again. There's some little tricks about when you solve for n, you then probably want to convert it back to years, not just leaving it as compounding periods. But yes, this week we'll do a lot of PV and FV and a bunch of different investments and things, but next week we'll solve for the other two. And when you're using the calculator, it's no more difficult for basically, as opposed to flipping the equation around and using logarithms and things like that. But I will mention briefly how you can do it anyways. Okay.